Great. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. The evening belongs to Esther and Jeremy. Esther, would you give us a brief intro to your life in London before you moved to Israel, and tell us a little bit about your life in Israel, just to give us a bit of context, and Jeremy will do the same, and then we'll move on to a series of questions that we have for you.
Sure. So my official title is Caroline's baby sister. I am the youngest member of the Blau family, and happily enjoyed coming to Dunstan Road for many, many, many years. The children's service, running up and down the stairs, sweeties on Simchat Torah, and even winning a prize at Purim for fancy dress in the shul hall there. And then at the age of 18, I came on Hachshara program through Bnei Akiva, and I came out to Kibbutz Lavi, and then basically stayed on Aliyah since then. I studied social work at Hebrew University, and I was actually recruited into the army because I came on Aliyah just a few days before my 20th birthday, and for some reason no shaliach in England told me that was the ruling then, but never mind, that happens. But it was a fantastic experience. I served as a mental health officer in the army, and during that time met my husband, who's from Bushi, and he's in the same garin as Jeremy that he'll tell you about. And he suggested we start our married life in Kibbutz Alumim, and that's how I came to be on Alumim. And I actually came on Aliyah with Jeremy. We weren't friendly, he's a little bit older than I am, but we were on the same plane coming on Aliyah on the 1st of October 1984. And that's what do I do? Yeah, which is quite important. So I started out as a social worker. I'm a therapist. I'm a trauma therapist. And I've been working for a few years now in the local resilience center. I'm the manager of our clinic, and I'll be discussing resilience as we go along.
Terrific, thanks. And Jeremy, I have to declare an interest in Jeremy. Jeremy's married to another Aussie friend of mine. So it's lovely to be able to reconnect with Jeremy. I'm sorry under such circumstances, but you'll be sharing this with Debbie, I'm sure.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Jeremy Maissel. I grew up in Wembley Synagogue. What was Wembley Synagogue? Now it's been sold, but that's the community I grew up in. I was involved in Bnei Akiva. After school, I went a year on Hachshara to Israel, and after coming back, I went to study in Manchester, and I was very active in Bnei Akiva, and we formed a group to go on Aliyah together to Kibbutz Alumim. And as Esther said, in October 1984, 39 years ago, got on a plane, came to Israel, straight to Kibbutz Alumim. That's where I've been living since then. I'm married to Debbie from Sydney, have 4 children, 2 little granddaughters. That's the previous episodes of my life.
Thank you both very much. We're going to hear about life since October the 7th. And as Esther mentioned, she works in resilience, and we're going to talk about that more specifically this evening. But I'm going to ask Jeremy to set the scene. We've all watched the news. We all know the broad outline of the story, but Jeremy's going to share from his perspective what happened on the kibbutz. I'm going to hand the screen to him so he can give you a sense of where Alumim is. We'll spend a few minutes on that context, and then we'll move to talking about resilience and where we go from here. Jeremy.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, before I begin, I'd just like to warn anyone who has children or sensitive people around them that this description contains very disturbing contents, and you should act accordingly. So just beware if there are kids running around, or just bear that in mind. So I'm going to share the screen and show you a map of our local area.
And Jeremy, okay. If you can speak, this might be a message to me specifically, but if you can speak a bit louder.
Okay, I will do my best. So on the left side of the screen, you can see a large map with the bottom left-hand corner, the area of the bigger map. next to the Gaza border. These are the neighboring communities. Here is Kfar Aza, Saad, and Kibbutz Nachal Oz. Here is Alumim, and along the road 232 are all the kibbutzim communities right on the Gaza border, from 0 to 4 kilometers from the Gaza border. So Alumim, our close neighbors, Be'eri, Reim, which was close to where the music festival was, Kisufim, Ein HaShlosha, Nirim, and Niroz. So just to get an impression of the scale, so Alumim is 3 kilometers from Saad, a couple of kilometers from Be'eri.
Very close.
Very close. So I want to briefly look at 5 scenes from what happened to me on the 7th of October. 6:30 in the morning, we get an alarm to go into color red alarm to go into our protected rooms. This is something we're very used to, which has happened many, many times over the last 20 years. But this is a very prolonged barrage of missiles. And we also hear triggering of Iron Dome, which intercepts the missiles going towards the local area and all over the country. I want to read to you a couple of messages that were on the WhatsApp group, the Alumim Security WhatsApp group, because this is our sole source of information. It was Shabbat morning, and as a religious kibbutz, people don't usually have their phones open, but under the circumstances, everyone knew to open their phones. And this was the information that we were getting. So 6:33, rocket barrage towards the area and the center of Israel. Stay in your protected rooms until told otherwise. 7:11, lock doors to houses and stay in protected rooms, possible terrorist infiltration. 7:24, terrorists in Alumim, stay locked in houses. And throughout the morning, at various stages, we could hear gunfire from outside, light weapon fire. At 1:09, attack now from the direction of the avocado. Stay inside protected rooms with metal window shutters closed. Do not go out under any circumstances. And that's where we were until just after midnight. At midnight, 00:37, we received an evacuation notice from the army. The evacuation is for everyone. Will be during the night around 3 a.m. depending on the situation. The evacuation is to a hotel in Tiberias. We don't know which hotel. You have to start organizing for evacuation for several days, take medical equipment, nappies, health insurance card, wallets. And then at 1:28, details of where we're going to be evacuated. In the end, the evacuation was delayed and we left at 3 in the afternoon on Sunday. Second scene is what was going on outside. That's what we knew. And our assumption was that a few terrorists have got over the border, 6, 10 terrorists. They've come to Alumim. Our emergency squad, our security first responders are out there, and in an hour or so, the entire IDF, the army, will descend on Alumim, and soon we'll be out. But that's not what was going on outside. So at 6:30, the emergency squad immediately activated itself. They went to get their guns from the weapons store. The command post, which is an air raid shelter by the dining room, can see pictures from cameras around the kibbutz, so they can direct the emergency squad. And in total, there were 8 attacks on the kibbutz. The emergency squad consists of 12 members of the kibbutz, from young guys straight out of the army to family men with 7 children. They stave off these attacks during the day. they're reinforced by army units and parts of army units who join the battle, either coming directly to Alumim or joining the battle as they were driving south to come to the aid of Be'eri or other kibbutzim. The IDF came and actually took control of the battle at 3 in the afternoon on Sunday afternoon. Three in the afternoon on Shabbat afternoon. Another scene I'd like to take you to is the scene in the house of the midwife on Alumim. Michaela is a midwife in Soroka Hospital in Beersheba, but she's also the nurse on Alumim. A lot of the fighting took place very near her home, and in the fierce fighting, several members of the emergency squad sustained serious wounds. Menachem wasn't injured. He was taking cover behind a shelter when someone threw a grenade at him. He jumped out to avoid the grenade and came face to face with a terrorist who he killed. Amichai had bullet and shrapnel wounds in his arms. They took him to Michaela's house. Her first thought was, he's dripping blood all over my floor. She left the protected room with her husband and her father-in-law. The children remained behind. She opened a video call to our doctor, who's also the head of the emergency room at Soroka Hospital, who gave her instructions. They brought Ayal to Michaela. A bullet had entered his cheek and was lodged behind his ear. A second bullet had entered his shoulder, gone through his lungs and out of his back. A third bullet was in his back. Eran had 3 bullets in his thigh. Amichai and Ayal had to be evacuated. Magen David Adom wouldn't or couldn't come to the battle scene. Michaela's husband, Tzviki, got the car. He put the wounded inside and they evacuated them under fire to Netivot, where ambulances were waiting to take them to Soroka. And those guys, after driving out at breakneck speed to get to Netivot, to get these people to medical attention, when they left them in Netivot, they came straight back to carry on fighting. Another scene, and then I think we'll go over to Esther, was at the house of Benny and Tzipi. Benny and Tzipi are from the Vatikim, the older people who built the kibbutz. They're 78 years old. They were in their protected room. They heard a noise from outside. Benny went out to investigate. A terrorist had thrown a rock through the glass back door, and Benny came face to face with this terrorist who shot him twice in the stomach. The terrorist left the house, and in the gunfight, he killed Captain Itai Cohen, and the terrorist was also killed. Benny returned to the protected room, told his wife Tippy that he'd been shot and needed attention. And people from the emergency squad came, and they saw that he needed to be evacuated. They couldn't take him around the peripheral road because it was still under threat from near the avocados. So they put him on his mobility scooter, and he drove up to the middle of the kibbutz with 2 soldiers in front, 2 soldiers behind, pushing the mobility scooter, and he also was evacuated under fire. One of the guys who was in that car, the shooting hit his gun and he got shrapnel in his hand. But I should tell you that Benny, Ayal, Eran, and Amichai are all okay. Some of them are in rehabilitation, but Benny, this 78-year-old, is walking around like nothing happened to him. So that's a very dark picture, but an accurate picture that we have, and that we're living with and coping with at the moment.
Jeremy, thank you so much for sharing that. We can all hear in your voice the croaking and the pain of reliving that story. And I know you've said it to other communities as well where you're speaking, and it's so important that we listen, and it's important that this is documented for historical purposes as well. So thank you for sharing, as difficult it is. Esther, you're going to tell us, what does resilience mean? It's the buzzword everybody's talking about. You run a resilience centre. What does it mean?
Yes.
What does it look like for you now in helping people and helping yourselves? The carers need to be cared for as well. Can you
Most definitely.
give
Yeah.
us a sense of that?
Well, I'd also like to start with a thank you, because it's not obvious that a community in London would be interested in listening to our stories. And yet so important. It's so important for us to know that you out there are taking an interest and want to hear firsthand what's happening. And thank you, Jeremy, as well, because I know myself, because I sit and listen all day, I know how hard it is to go over the story, and it's hard for me even to hear the story of somebody else saying my experience. I just want to add to our story the fact that 17 of our Nepalese and Thailandi workers were massacred as well. When the terrorists came in, as you saw from the map, Gaza is right behind us, and they broke through the back fence. They came first straight to our main gate and were shooting on the road because they were trying to kill as many of the people who'd been in the party as possible. That road has already been renamed the Road of Death, because there were so many murdered on it. And as I say, they murdered the foreign workers, and we're all just innocent people. And really, really, really incredibly lucky. We're using the word miracle. The fact that for whatever reason, we're kept alive. And part of resilience, first of all, is owning your story, is admitting to what you went through, is acknowledging what you went through, and claiming it as your own. Because truth is so important, and especially in our day and age, truth is very often distorted. And even when we read a story in the newspaper, it very often has an angle, or it's misinterpreted, or the wrong data. So one of our first messages in resilience is telling your story, owning your story in your own words. Now, having worked in resilience for a number of years, we're trained, my team especially trained as well, to know to even use a specific language. For example, we won't necessarily say that's it, we're broken, we're destroyed, we can't function. We truly believe in the human ability to get through something. And I think you'll agree with me, that is basically the DNA of the Jewish people. Survival is our story all throughout history. And we truly believe that we all have abilities to get through even the hardest of events that we have in our life. So we wouldn't say, that's it, I'm destroyed, I'm completely broken. We'll say, I have had a terrible, horrific, awful experience, which I am now surviving. And our job in the Resilience Centre is to help people be able to tell the narrative in this manner, and thereby also immediately see what it is that's keeping them going. And people are going. It's incredible. Our whole community, we've been evacuated to Netanya, and we're a very organized group. And on the one hand, those first few days, everybody's still in shock. We know that what you need is what's called first response. Like when, obviously, if any of you have been in a car accident or been attacked or anything like that, God forbid, or received very, very bad news, you can't take it in. To be completely honest with you, we're 5 weeks now after the 7th of October. I still haven't fully absorbed, because it's just too much. We don't have the capacity in our brain to process it and to take it in. But we certainly know that between 24 and 48 hours is just to start piecing it together, start remembering where I was, what was I doing. We've also learned that when we ask people to tell their story, we actually start it from the night before, because we need to put it in context. So it's not just telling the story of the terrible, terrible episode. It's remembering that the night before we were dancing around in the shul, Simchat Torah, which already reminds us that we come from a strong community, that we have families. So in the world of resilience, you're already laying down, like softening, so as to speak, building some kind of cotton wool environment as to how you then tell your story. And as Jeremy said, 6:30 the next morning, crazy, crazy situation, stuffed into the room. From my point of view as well, in addition to, like Jeremy, he was also with his family. There were 7 of us, including 2 small babies in the room. My son-in-law, who was with us, he had a pistol. He kept his hand on the pistol the whole time, and the other hand he had on the door, because you can't lock those safe rooms from the inside. And you've probably seen terrible footage of what happened in the communities next to us, with complete disregard for human life or whatever. Part of my job is that as soon as a situation like this breaks out, I have what's called the hotline, that anybody who's in distress or anxiety or needs help, they phone a certain number, that number comes straight through to me. And 7:15 in the morning, I get a message from my good friend in Kfar Aza, one of my team, and she says to me, Esther, things are happening, I'm here, whatever you need. And I did need, and then the phone calls started coming in, complete chaos. And so from that, I was already understanding that this was something extremely unusual. I still had not fully comprehended just how many terrorists were coming across. Even then, I think in my tiny brain, I thought maybe 10, maybe 15. I then started receiving phone calls from people all over Israel, telling me that they were trying to get in touch with their children aged between 20 and 30 who were at that music festival. And that also gave me information that I understood that there was a music festival, to the extent that I'm even speaking to somebody who's on the other phone with their son who's hiding somewhere and he's injured, and can I send the army out to him? And then I call the army, and the army tell me they can't get out because they have no control over the road. So slowly but surely, I'm beginning to understand and figure out what's going on here. My job is to keep as calm as possible so that I can listen, so that I can respond. There's no way that I could ever panic or I could ever lose it. But I'm obviously aware at the same time how that's affecting myself and my body. And at the same time, I also don't want to express to my family in the room that I know all of this that's going out, because I don't need them to become hysterical either. When it got to the stage of us telling our children that the babies had to be quiet, obviously stories from the Holocaust popped into my mind. And already, even just to explain where my mind was at the beginning, when I started answering the phone as a religious Jew, I was thinking, okay, I'll answer it with my left hand and not my right hand, because it's Shabbat, because it's Simchat Torah. What do we do? How do I do this that I don't completely break Shabbat and Yom Tov? But when we had to keep the babies quiet, it was obvious to us to open the laptop and to show cartoons and keep the babies happy. So as I say, this continued throughout the day. The lady that I referred to before, my friend Mira, I wasn't getting any response from her during the course of the day. That also showed me that something must be going on in Kfar Aza, as Jeremy showed you on the map. And we also learned of one of our own soldiers, a son from Kibbutz. He'd left the Kibbutz. Nobody knew where he was, what was going on. There was huge chaos. Obviously, people's anxiety were going through the roof, as it is. I mean, we don't need Woody Allen to remind us just how anxious we all are as a people, but we certainly are. and I just pause here for a second. The work that we do day to day in our resilience center is to help people build their resilience by training them and teaching them breathing techniques, or what's called tapping, to calm yourself down, to keep your blood pressure down, but also to know that if you do vomit or you do faint or however your body expresses itself, it's okay. You don't have to fight it. These are all normal reactions to something that's not normal. And for us, being out of control has unfortunately become something of a norm. We've learned to deal with rocket attacks over 20 years already. The tunnels, the kites, the balloons that have been coming over, and everything that we've been doing all these years has been as a response to whatever they've been chucking our way, our creation. I take responsibility. The Iron Dome, America together with Gold, Daniel Gold, unbelievable people that have put together methods and ways of protecting us. And my job is to help people understand what they have to do when there's alarm, to understand even that the alarm is there to help us. I don't have it to hand, but I wrote a children's book, which is the story of Sheva Adom, which is the alarm that we hear, because I already knew years ago children stopped using the color red in their paintings. They stopped wearing the color red. Color red became the enemy. And also, as part of resilience, it's about understanding and knowing who is the enemy and who is here to help me. And through the story, we learn that color red is actually our friend, because as soon as you hear it, you know that you have to run to safety. We all have safe rooms now in all our buildings on the kibbutz. We also have like little shelters. Oh, Caroline's showing us the book. We have little shelters that have been built out. We know exactly what we have to do. And if in the beginning, I would say the very beginning, the rocket attacks were quite random, and obviously they weren't as sophisticated as they are now. The last few years, nobody takes any chances. Everybody knows they have to go into the safe room. And having said all of that, we still did not, I certainly didn't fully comprehend that so many terrorists could come across. And a very big part of what we talk about in resilience, in our workshops and in our programs, in addition to understanding what you yourself as a human being do to get through a terrible situation, we always talk about having a very strong army and having a very strong defense, and that we're protected. And I have to say that that has definitely been chipped away somewhat, but we're working on that. But it's basically the belief, the human belief in ourselves, in human beings, and the belief in goodness, in what we're seeing now. If we are able to see the positivity, the goodness, again, the fact that you as a community take an interest in us, and maybe next time you're in shul and you're saying the prayer for the state of Israel, you're thinking Alumim, you're thinking Jeremy, Esther, our families. It makes a connection. Maybe you're supporting a program or a project. Maybe you're even, I don't know, sending socks over. We're weak in a way. And what's also important in resilience is to acknowledge that when you're weak, that's okay. And you can ask for help. And that's okay. That's a strength. Weakness can be a strength. And it's about pushing through. It's about discovering things you didn't know. When I sat with the men, as Jeremy mentioned, the first response team, these men that literally ran out the door. And for them also, the first time that they were fighting for their home. They've all fought on the battlefield. So they know what war is, and they're trained in a military way of how to fight the enemy. But this is completely different. When the enemy come into your home and you can hear on the phone your wife saying, I think there's terrorists next to my house, but you're over on the other side of the kibbutz. Do you stay there? Do you run back? The drama, the decision-making in split seconds is phenomenal. What Jeremy described, that seeing your friend fighting for his life and wanting to help him, but at the same time you're injured yourself, it's really, really phenomenal. And
Esther, can I interrupt you there, because it's compelling what
yes,
you're
sorry.
talking about. No, don't be sorry at all. But I think it'd be good to sort of perhaps get Jeremy in at this point to talk a little bit about starting the rebuilding the community. I know you're all in Netanya, and perhaps you'll talk to us about what you're doing every day in Netanya in a moment. But Jeremy, can I ask you to give us a sense? We're 5 weeks down the track. I know the Refet, I believe you start the cows, you're starting to build that again. Tell us how the kibbutz is responding as a community itself.
Well, we may be 5 weeks down the line, but still there are very, very many unknowns ahead of us. We're predicted, they tell us we're going to be out of Alumim for 3 to 6 months. I don't really know what's going to happen with that. You know, I changed my address on the newspaper to come to the hotel, and I don't know how long to extend that now. I did it for a month first. I don't know whether to do it for 2 months, for 3 months. We're in Netanya. We're living in a hotel. I don't know if you've read A Gentleman in Moscow. It's about a man who's sort of trapped in a hotel, and I feel that I've become a gentleman in Netanya. The kibbutz is, I think, a very strong, close-knit community as a collective, cooperative kibbutz. And right from the beginning, really from the start, we know that we have to pull together as a community to get some regularity and structure to our lives. So if I go back to the kibbutz, so on the kibbutz, there was a lot of damage done to the cow sheds. They burnt down the cattle feed. They burnt down the milking parlor. They destroyed tractors. They shot into the milk tanks. They destroyed the computers. So the Alumim was a battle scene. The cows went for 4 days without food. There were no trucks that were willing to come to Alumim. There's no way to distribute the food. The cows are in a very bad way, but immediately started trying to get the cow sheds working again, trying to get people into milk. We asked for volunteers. The farm manager put out a message asking for volunteers, and this is something characteristic of what's happening in Israel. He asked for volunteers. He got about 700 offers of people who said, I'll come and milk the cows, and another 700 offers of people who said, we'll massage the hands of the people milking the cows because we don't know how to milk cows. Yeah. Volunteers have been coming down. They've been in teams. They still doing it to this day. They repaired the milking parlor systems. They got the tank working again. Previously, the normal milk yield of a cow on Alumim is 40 plus liters average a day. When they started milking the cows right at the beginning, they were down to 17 liters a day, and they just had to throw the milk away because it was full of what the cows had diseases, etc. But now, as far as I know, they're up to 35 liters a day again. In Netanya, or let's say going back to normal life on Kibbutz Alumim as a collective community, we have all our cars are shared. When people want a car, they book a car online, and the computer tells them which car to take, and they go to the key cupboard and they take the car and they drive and they come back, and they get charged for however many kilometers they traveled. So we all brought our cars to Netanya, And now we're split into 2 hotels. So there are 2 computer terminals at the hotels. And when people book a car, they can book a car and they can take the keys from the car, from the cabinet, and drive wherever they want. As far as education is concerned, within a couple of weeks, we already had educational frameworks working. And every day a bus comes to our hotel and takes the kids to the other hotel where they have educational frameworks, from toddlers right up to older kids who are now starting in a school in Netanya. So the message is very much to get back to some sort of normal life. As far as when we're going to return, how we're going to return, those are big unknowns, and that's something that we face in the future.
Thank you. And Esther, your work is not just with your kibbutz members, correct? You have a much wider role with everyone from the south. Can you tell us what are you doing every day? Well, you're doing a lot of kilometers.
Definitely tell you what I'm doing. But I also think it's really important to mention that we're still in it. There's a war going on. And yes, we've been evacuated to Netanya and on a level that our families are safe. But even that, not 100%. My son is serving in Gaza now. My son-in-law is serving in Alumim now. We're all still heavily involved. And every day, I said to Jeremy just before, everybody I spoke to today has just told me about somebody else who died. This Friday was the first Friday in 4 weeks that I wasn't going to a funeral. Jeremy's wife, as you mentioned, Debbie, she's the social worker in Kibbutz Be'eri. It's a really a long, slow process. And part of what we do in resilience is that, yes, we talk about things that happen in the past, but we also have to prepare ourselves what's going to happen in the future. And at the same time, be well aware of what's going on in the present. It's kind of like living in a time machine. So what's happened with us is that a number of our communities have been evacuated. If you remember on the map that Jeremy showed, so there's Sad and Alumim, there's also a moshav called Tukuma and Shokeda, Kfar Maimon. There's a few other, thanks Jeremy, there's a few other, here you can see Kfar Maimon there, Zimrat, Tukuma, Shokede, all these areas, they're moving slightly away from the border, but they've also been evacuated. And they've been evacuated all over the country. So we have a community right up in the north, next to, it's called a place called Migdal, it's overlooking the Kinneret. And we have in Herzliya, we have in Jerusalem a few communities, we have in Neve Ilan, in Kibbutz Almog, in the Dead Sea, down in Eilat. And today I discovered 10 families who are living like out in the desert in some really remote place. And my job now is to set up 10 new resilience centers. So we've gone from my one resilience center to 10 resilience centers throughout the country, which means taking on new staff and making sure that they're trained in trauma, and then anyway, retraining them, because somebody who lives here in Netanya, she doesn't fully understand what it means to have lived for 20 years under rocket attacks. So I need to quickly train her. And then now this new staff, they're helping people on an individual level, family level. So for some people, obviously, that we're definitely working through trauma. For many people, it's also about just understanding how to get through the day. There's so much chaos in the hotels. The cities, they've all become full, obviously, of people who've been evacuated from all over the country. We've been squeezed in because the north as well, people have been evacuated. And Eilat, it's a phenomenon when you think of this hotel, this holiday resort town. But now what we're seeing is that these people who've moved into the hotels, they're not leaving the hotels. There are some people who aren't even leaving their room. And people are still scared, still nervous. There were alarms in Eilat last week as well. A lot of people have lost their sense of security, of what they can what they think they can cope with. So part of our job is helping them see they can take another step, they can do something else. What also is really important that happened to us in the beginning, that when we arrived at the hotels, we were overwhelmed with support. People brought clothes, and they were giving out shoes and even laptops and toys for the children. And it kind of goes against our principle of what resilience is about. Resilience says, wait, sit down, take stock, understand what you've been through, and then know to say, what is it that you need? It took me a while as well to appreciate that, yes, I needed some clothes for Shabbat because I didn't have, things like that. But the concept is respect the person first. But because we were so overwhelmed, everybody was just, they got even more lost. But those are things that we learn along the way. I keep on saying it's like learning to swim when you're already in the water and you haven't had necessarily lessons before, and you've just got to keep your head above water many times. I also was overwhelmed. As I say, we're setting up resilience centers, hundreds of psychologists and social workers and psychiatrists saying, I want to help, let me help. But I didn't yet know what I needed them for. And they were just, I literally had to physically move some of them aside and say, please, beg you, just sit down and give me 5 minutes to breathe and I'll tell you what I need. But now, thank God, that's all coming together. It's huge. It's a huge program. Eshkol and Sderot also very heavily suffered. I have a very, very good, I don't know if I even mentioned it before, that my friend Mira, who I told you sent the message 7:15 in the morning, it was discovered that she had died. And I have another very good friend from the kibbutz next door. She was also killed. There was no body, so there was no proper funeral for her. And I have another very good friend, also a member of my team, whose sister has been abducted. And I went to visit her and her kibbutz, and it's just amazing to me. I could feel even the oxygen coming away from my throat, that everybody she's pointing to, that one's 2 children, that one's mother, that one's father. And you just can't make sense on a level of humanity of how this could have happened. And people aren't screaming everywhere to get them back. And yet those people managed to get up and breathe and get through the day and keep pushing and praying and hoping and figuring out and strongly believing that people will come back safe and sound. And I have to admit something else. I've often talked in a jokey way about having Jewish guilt, but I have had difficulties speaking to people from Kfar Aza, Be'eri, Nachal Oz, because we were saved. I don't know why. And they weren't. They lost so many. And it feels like it's not right. It's not right that, I don't know, to be happy. But then I turn it around and I say to myself, but okay, that is what happened. We have to train our thoughts, which is also resilience. And you can't keep saying, you can't stay in that place of, yes, it could have been me. You have to turn it around and say, but it wasn't me. And it wasn't Jeremy, thank God. And it wasn't my husband. It wasn't my children. So that means that there's a reason that we're still here. And we have to figure out what is that reason. And we have to push through, and we have to make tomorrow better than yesterday. And that's what resilience is about. And that's what the story of the Jewish people is about. And that's all we aim to be. We have to make it better. We have to show that goodness overrides. And it's very hard, I have to say, even seeing what you're going through in London with all the Palestinians marching and being able to be behind freedom of speech and all liberalism, etc. I'm very often scared. I'm scared for my sister. I'm scared for my family there, that what could potentially happen. I've myself suffered anti-Semitism, obviously, way back as a kid. So it's really, really important that we all really come together and figure this out. And just
a dark time for the Jewish people, yeah. But I think our focus is on you, Esther. I think we'll be okay here. Well, but let's focus on what's happening in Israel, where it's very real, these tremendous challenges that you're facing. And I wanted to ask you, just very briefly, who is caring for the carers? You know, how do people, okay, we're listening to your story, but what support are you getting? And
So,
team.
yeah.
And then we'll
So
move
we build it as far as the resilience centers are concerned, that the people who are giving care, they have other people who they then meet with them, and then they have other people that they then meet with them. And
Right.
also part of resilience, and I do it for myself, it's organizing your day. I allow myself a half an hour in the morning to be all over the place, or let myself cry, or do whatever I've got to do. And then I snap out of it. I have to say, when I daven now, the words have a whole different meaning for me. And at the end of the day, I also have to acknowledge that maybe I've managed to do A, B, and C, and D and E, I'll have to leave it for tomorrow because I'm just too exhausted. I also have, apart from my wonderful family who are loving, and Caroline is supplying me with fantastic chocolate every week. But I have girlfriends, and I literally said to them, I need you to look out for me. I need you to be here for me. That's what I mean about saying that we have to admit to our vulnerability. And also, like Jeremy, have grandchildren. And I know that I need to just like be with them. I even spent Shabbat, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I am ridiculous and I don't care anymore that I say things now. I spent the day holding a tea bag in my pocket and just smelling it every now and then, because it reminded me of being with my parents drinking tea or something like that. And again, it's identifying the little things that keep you going and appreciating them, and helping each other. That's what we work through in resilience. Everybody's been through something, and we have to identify what helped you then can help you now.
The collective trauma and the collective grief of the country, I think, is something that will play out for several generations, I suspect, actually, the next.
Definitely.
Jeremy, you're an educator, and that's what you've been doing professionally for many years. You're talking to lots of groups of people, I understand, and many of us here, and Esther touched on the situation here, have kids at university or are concerned about, without, I don't want it to focus on us, but what might be some of the takeaways educationally that you're thinking of? And then I appreciate there's probably not one answer, but how might you give us a framework for thinking educationally about what's going on in Israel?
Well, to be honest, it's been very hard to think about those things, and I've been more focused on coping with what we have to face. I did read a couple of things that Zohar Aviv wrote, who is he's in charge of education for Birthright, and I think that some of the points that he raises are important and useful. I think the first thing that we have to be very clear on is unequivocal moral clarity, that this was a crime against humanity, and there's no necessary context, there's no multiple narratives or diverse perspectives. This was a heinous crime against humanity. The brutality, cold-blooded murder of people, and worse. And so that's something that we have to be clear on, and there are no excuses and no circumstances and no context and no narratives. The second thing that I think is an important value that we see is Arvut Hadadit, which is mutual commitment or shared responsibility, solidarity, which is a real shining light that we're seeing in Israel and throughout the Jewish world, that people have come together and feel this sense of caring for each other. And that's not based on victimhood or raw emotional desire for help, but as an ancient Jewish value that no member of the Jewish people stands alone. And especially in Israel, we've been very lacking in unity in the past year. And one sort of silver lining in this huge cloud is that people have managed to overcome lots of differences and are working together. I think increasingly, when we look at campuses, we have to bear in mind that there is a silent majority that, certainly amongst the Jewish community, a silent majority that isn't radicalized and not moved by these radical voices. And we have to make sure that the silent majority is not a silenced majority. It's very hard to just work on hasbara, on explaining Israel and excusing Israel and being apologetic for Israel. I've always been working on the subject of Israel education rather than hasbara, and I think that understanding and increasing our knowledge and learning about Israel and learning about Israel's history is essential for understanding what the situation is really, and not being swayed by various radicalized voices. And I think we also have to be very careful and intelligent in how in the news sources that we read, and to understand where our news is coming from. I think in a bigger context, we have to remember that the state of Israel was not set up as a result of the Holocaust. The state of Israel is based, if we just look at political Zionism, that's over 100 years old, but political Zionism is based on Zionism, which is an integral part of Judaism, which is a history of 3,500 years. And not to be distracted and think that the purpose of Israel is a safe refuge for the Jewish people, but rather that it's an ancient connection to our land, and that is the basis for the thriving, modern, liberal, democratic Jewish state that Israel is now.
Thank you, and it will continue to be that, we hope. Pray for that. I'm going to open up to a few questions in a moment, but just to ask both of you, what is it that we can do to help? I know that there's various fundraising appeals, and we'll send out the links should people be inclined to contribute. But give us, Esther, how best can we help?
Well, first of all, by acknowledging that you're not helpless, because I've heard many people say to me, "Oh, I live abroad. There's nothing I can do. I'm helpless." You're not helpless. You can do something, and I'm sure that you just have to figure that out. It could be getting involved in a project. It could be, as I say, davening, praying for us. Jeremy will speak about the project for Alumim to help us put ourselves back together again. One of the projects that we have in the Resilience Center is, which we've actually done for 2 years now, Hanukkah time, we send out a therapeutic gift package to families. And in this gift package, we have 8 smaller gifts, so that every night when the family lights candles, they come together around the Hanukkah. As Jeremy mentioned before, it's our own traditional values. And they open this gift as a surprise, and it's a game or it's a craft activity. And it's really, really, really important this year more than any other year that they can have that, because as I say, I've been in the hotels and it's absolute chaos. People are sitting down to dinner, they don't even know where their children are. They don't have good quality family time, and when you have it, it's in your small hotel bedroom. Like, if you could imagine now, whichever room you're in, most of you look as if you're in your study. Just imagine that that is now your room. That's it. Your entire family is living in that room. So in our project, which we're trying to raise money for, there'll also be a Chanukiah, because people left home without the Chanukiah. And it doesn't have to be the wonderful silver Chanukiah. It can be a simple one. So if people are happy to support us with that, we're arranging 2,000 Hanukkah bags to go out, and they'll be all over the country. And it also shows people that we see them, we know what they need, we know what they want, and we are making their Hanukkah. And obviously Hanukkah, the whole story of Hanukkah is about surviving, coping, rebuilding, heroism, and finding the light. Excuse me for sounding a little bit American, but yeah, we all definitely need a bit of light in our lives right now. And the miracle of the oil, that's resilience. It took me a long time to even understand that whole concept of you think the tank is empty, you think you've got nothing left in the jar, and yet you have it, and you push on and you push on, and the candles, another day, another day. That's the Hanukkah story.
Thank you. And Jeremy, give us what can we do to help? And then we'll open up for a few questions if people would like to stay on.
Well, we set up a campaign for rehabilitation, resilience, and renewal on Alumim. And I know it's very far ahead of us, but ultimately we need to get to a situation where our members, our families, and our children will want to come back to Alumim and see that as their home again. And I was sitting down with people who were helping us sort of phrase our campaign and launch our campaign, especially for British donors. And they were saying, well, you need to itemize what you need to price things, you need to prioritize things, you have to say if you don't reach your target sum, how you're going to use your money, who's going to be in charge of transparency, etc. And we struggled with that. Part of it was the Israeli mentality of we'll manage with this, we'll manage with that, we'll get matching, and really, in the end, we understood that we're not in a situation to write down exactly what we need, because anything that our needs in the past are no longer relevant, and we have to understand where we're going to. What our needs are, what our sources are. For example, one of the things that we thought about was to get equipment for the emergency squad, an armored car, etc. Now, we're not sure, maybe the government will give us that, maybe another donor will give us that. We talked about a children's zoo and a children's farm and a petting zoo. But I don't know if that's the most important thing that we need for the future. In the end, we agreed with this charity that we can't define our needs at the moment because there are so many unknowns in front of us. But we gave a tentative list, and all the money for the campaign will be used with the goal of making Alumim a viable and an attractive home for us, our children, to come back to in the future.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's a difficult. Funders have rules, and speaking as one who is involved in that world, but there's been a lot of flexibility, and hopefully you're dealing with funders who are showing the flexibility during this emergency period, and happy to have an offline conversation with you about that. I'd like to open up for any questions, 2 or 3 questions before we close the evening. Just unmute yourself. I'll just put the screen, show everybody. If you want to unmute yourself and ask any questions. There are none.
Oh, go on, somebody say something, just to give Jeremy and I a bit of feedback. Go on, you got this, Golders Green.
We love you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, thank you.
Oh, and Caroline's going, because you're blurred, unblur yourself. Otherwise,
how do I unblur Blau? I can share Esther's book, and there's an English translation. I I'm not very good at Zoom, but I can do PDF, but I can share Esther's book. Esther, Stevie you shared a video of the rebuilding of the Refet, so maybe we can share that as well. Yes?
Yeah, sure. Just taking an interest is wonderful. Yes.
And also a lot of people from Shul have donated, and thank you so much for everyone who has donated. It means a lot to my sister, to Jeremy, and to me.
We'll send through links.
If there aren't any questions, though, I'd like to add a couple of sentences, but I'm happy to wait. If
Jackie Crossley has a question.
Jackie,
yeah, no, it wasn't a question. I was going to say what we are doing, and I say I'm doing every day is davening for everybody, saying to Hillel, and I think that's probably it's our way of getting God to help us, and this is as much as we can do really, because we're not there to help. But if we can do something from here in that way, I think it's very important.
Absolutely.
I think, Jeremy, somebody's waving at you, maybe a family member.
It's Sharon and the family, my family, Michael's wife and family. They actually came to visit us on Alumim. So they saw what Alumim's like.
And they came to visit us in Shul yesterday. Rabbi Leitner was in our Shul. We took the service yesterday.
We didn't mention that Alumim have guest houses, and we used to have every Shabbat people came for a Shabbat, and that's obviously tourism has been very heavily affected. But maybe one day, I can also see my cousins there, Denise and Mark. Hello.
We all look forward to coming to Alumim.
I wanted to thank you both, Esther, particularly because I've been following your journey online on Facebook, and I want to thank you because being here we get bits and pieces, and to hear the truth of what went on helps us to be stronger in disseminating to other people, and it gives us strength as well here, because as you know, things here are not always as nice, but it gives us strength to feel like we're part of it with you, and please God, when Alumim is back together, we are coming, and I am coming to milk at the Refet as a kibbutznik from Steliahu. I will come and I will milk with Stevie, and looking forward to that, please God. And anything you need, just ask. Okay, but thank you both of you. It's giving your time.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, I'll give a final sentence to Esther and Jeremy. No one else? Okay, Jeremy, Esther, a sentence each to send us off with a positive thought or a reflective thought.
Just a couple of sentences. As Esther mentioned, our foreign farm workers were murdered, slaughtered mercilessly on Alumim, but our story is better than others. It's due to luck or miracles or a combination of both, and the incredible, remarkable bravery of this emergency squad. But a few days ago, I was on Alumim. There's been a continual presence of 6 members of Alumim together with the army, and we sleep in an air raid shelter, which is the command post. And one evening I was talking to one of the guys from the emergency squad, and he said, don't turn Alumim into a legend. If the terrorists had turned left instead of right, if they'd have been a quarter of an hour later or 5 minutes earlier, if they'd aimed slightly right or slightly left, it would have been very different. There was a terrible massacre at Kfar Aza. Our dear neighbors in Kibbutz Be'eri, 130 members of the kibbutz were killed. In Kibbutz Nir Oz, a quarter of the kibbutz was killed or taken hostage. And that put things into context. Now, I personally, many people have said, what can I bring you? When I come, I want to bring you something. I say to them, look, I'm alive, my wife's alive, All my children are alive. My 2 beautiful granddaughters are alive. And there's nothing that can top that. Nothing in the world. And at this point, they usually break down into tears. But it's genuine, and it's a fantastic gift. And
I'm listening to something. Nothing can be more urgent than what I'm listening to, okay?
That's what really encourages me and gives me strength to carry on.
Oh, Sally, I'm not quite sure why there's a picture of, is that the Great Wall of China?
Yeah. Thank you, Jeremy, for those words. And Esther, the final word to you.
Final word. Well, I go along the same
both of you have inspired us this evening.
I go along. Could I just do one quick thing?
Sure.
Yeah. Also, like Jeremy, I'm in the same mindset. And I had words running around in my head that I put down after a couple of days into a poem that I will now read to you. The angel of death knocked on my door. He tapped on my window, dipped his fingers into my food, ran his nails across my spine. I saw his reflection in the mirror. Not today, Esther, not today. He moved on dancing his distorted dance, roaring his evil laugh. He rounded up my neighbors, Nachal Oz, Be'eri, near Oz, Kfar Aza, filling his pockets with children, stuffing men, women, families into his backpack. He smiled his crooked smile at the soldiers who fought him and swooped them up with his fist. And I watched him go, discarding the shells of the souls he had taken. He turned and waved. Not today, Esther, not today. And that, for me, sums up where I am. And if not, then I have a life, we have a life, you have a life. Let's make it a life that is important and effective.
Esther, thank you so much. That's the perfect note to end. We all must make our lives meaningful and have an impact where we can. Thank you to everybody for this evening. I'm going to stop the recording now, but I'll leave the Zoom open for a few minutes if anybody wants to have a chat with Esther. Caroline might want to just say good evening, good night, and we wish you both the best. And please send our collective thoughts and good wishes to all your kibbutz members and to everyone that you know. Thank you. So I'll stop the recording now.